My today's guest is someone who's been in the trenches of trauma healing with some of the most high-performing people on the planet. We're talking lawyers, doctors, founders. Laurel Roberts-Meese is a licensed trauma therapist, EMDR specialist, and a founder of Laurel Therapy Collective. She doesn't just help people manage pain and trauma, she helps them transform it. This episode goes deep into burnout, trauma recovery, and the tools to manage it all. Welcome to the Noelle Effect. Laurel, thank you for joining me.
Hi.
So I'm going to go straight to the core and say that, you work with some pretty big people, big faces, high achievers, people who are often seen as very put together. What are some of the invisible ways that in those people trauma shows up, especially when they're, functioning at such a high level?
Yeah. Well, I think we do ourselves a disservice when we talk about like high functioning trauma because it's still trauma. And just because someone has achieved some external markers of success doesn't mean that they are more mentally fit or well than other people. I just came from spending time with my sister-in-law who's got an 8-month-old baby, and like it takes a lot of energy and patience and strategizing just to be home with a baby all day. So just because, I'm sure you have listeners that maybe don't have a super high profile job, that like your skills and your mental fitness are just as important.
Exactly.
Right. But across the board, I've seen that there are some people that have a mindset and have put into practice some really key behavioral patterns that protect them from burnout. And they are able to sustain long, productive careers without burning out, while other people who are, just as smart, just as capable, if they have a different mindset and they're not willing to put in the work to protect themselves from burnout, they're going to repeatedly run into this pattern of driving themselves into the ground, burning themselves into a crisp, and then having to take a step back. Or either they choose to take a step back and go on medical leave or adjust their role, or they're forced to. We see people getting put on pips, people making sometimes like life-threatening errors in their work when they're burnt out. Like, this isn't just like, oh, I feel tired after work. There's catastrophic damage done when people are burnt out. So I've really been able to see in my clients, both the high profile clients and the everyday teachers, stay-at-home parents, mid-level managers, these protective factors. And looking, and if someone were to come to me and to tell me kind of what their self-preservation and their self-care looks like, I would probably be able to determine if they're a high risk for burnout or not.
They say that there are 4 different types of, there are multiple types and variations of burnout, but they say that there are 4 stages of burnout. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah. I'm not sure which kind of study or research this is referencing, but yeah, burnout is progressive, right? So if you're just starting to feel tired, maybe some more physical aches and pains, feeling a little emotionally disconnected, a lot of people just push through that and accept it as normal. That is the warning sign. That is, that's when you would want to plug in your phone if you were near a power outlet, right? When those early warning signs start showing up. But especially in the US, we are encouraged to just push through and keep going and ignore those warning signs. So then we get to moderate or severe burnout. And those are much harder to recover from. They take a real overhaul of not just your work life, but your personal life, your kind of how you're approaching your day to day. And so if you're in those early stages, like take heed. like really, now is the time to act. It's going to get much worse if you wait.
Yeah. I mean, for example, in my personal case, I had a few times being young and naive. I mean, I kind of did therapy for myself, telling myself that I didn't beat myself up because I let myself to burn out. That would be just, adding more to the
Yes.
situation I was in. So I just told myself, okay, you're young, you're fresh in the workforce. These are things that will happen. This already happened. So I'm not going to, cry over spilled milk.
Yeah.
I'm going to take this as a teaching moment to myself and I'm going to recover. It's going to take it took me quite a while.
Yes.
It's been a few times I've been burnt out, like almost to a crisp, not, to the point I needed professional help or therapy. But I took that as a teaching moment, as a learning situation. So that kind of helped me personally to, get over it. And the dreams and everything, all of these things are gonna, follow you around for quite some while after you remove yourself from the situation that's caused the burnout from the start. But it can help. So I personally believe that, taking that as a learning experience could also be very beneficial. So what looks like discipline, let's say, can actually in some cases be even avoidance. And that really flips the story we often hear about success. So how do you start untangling that mess?
Yeah. So discipline is it's not usually used in a negative context, right? It often is that pushing through. It's like, oh, my body's telling me I need to rest, but I'm going to get up at 6 and go for a run. And then I'm going to, record 5 podcasts. And then I'm going to, pitch my book to a publisher. And then just always being externally focused, like getting that hit of, neurochemicals when you cross something off your list. But if your body is telling you you need to rest and you're always ignoring it, like it will deteriorate. Right. A lot of people, a lot of high achievers have started to associate work and worthiness, or achievement and value. And there's like a moral messiness, and that they view taking a break or even just caring for themselves, even just like taking a lunch break, they view as something you have to earn and something that, there's no kind of, merit or no, like they downplay the value of time off the clock. And to those people, I always get curious, like, what are you working for? Right?
It's a really good question.
We can't live to work. I'm not interested in working a job where I can never see my friends or my family. I can never do things I love. I have no flexibility, right? And I recognize I run my own business, like I have a lot of privilege, but why are we doing the work? Very few of us live to work. There's some people that are very fortunate that find tremendous meaning in their work. I'm one of them. But it's not all there is in my life.
Yeah, it's really well said. And you reminded me of this documentary. It's a docu-series, actually, that I watched. It's called The Blue Zone. And this guy, I mean, you probably either watched it or heard about it.
I've heard
this
of
guy,
it, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good. Absolutely recommend it to you guys as well. This guy goes to Japan. And I mean, this is a common thing in all of the blue zones. But he actually explores the people centenarians, so the people that will go to 100 and above. And one of the main touching points to all of them is something they call Ikigai in Japan. So it's this. I mean, those people are old. Most of them don't work as an 8-hour work shift or 40-hour work week. They have a meaning they have something that gives them meaning each day. And I find it extremely inspiring when I see people that find that within their work, and they have both of those things in one place. That's amazing, but that's also, it's rare. So
Yes.
I've met a lot of people that kind of went to this like mindset, and I have to work to be worthy. I have to work to, achieve things. Of course, you need to work to achieve things.
Yeah.
You need to work on yourself, on your work per se,
Yeah.
and
We all need to earn a living.
we need to earn a
Yes.
living, of course. But
Mm-hmm.
at some point, that, kind of depending on what the person is like, this kind of, goes out of control. And if you're studying or working to be a lawyer, a doctor, a healthcare worker in general, a founder, you carry enormous responsibility towards yourself, towards the company, the people there. So I have a question. And what's for those people, for this crowd, what is one thing that you notice that they never allow themselves to say out loud until they're already in the therapy room?
There isn't one thing that is across the board, but there are 4 layers of health that I examine, and people that have burnt out have ignored multiple layers of their well-being for quite some time in favor of work. And actually, you're talking about the blue zones, the Ikigai, finding the meaning in life. That's actually kind of the last stage when I am working with someone. I like to start, if you imagine that there's a globe, like the outer crust of that globe is our physical health. So this is like our biomarkers of like cholesterol and like, blood pressure, like all these things. Also, people that have autoimmune conditions or a thyroid condition or a vitamin deficiency, or, something more complex and chronic. You'd be amazed how often people just ignore their physical health. And I'm not talking in this case about fitness. I'm talking about like actual medical issues. And most high achievers have access to good medical care, most of them. I recognize in the US, like we have major problems with our medical system, and that there's a lot of privilege with just being able to go to a doctor. But if we're talking about healthcare workers, lawyers, founders, all these people, like they do generally have healthcare access, and they just don't go. Like the body is inconvenient. So let's just kind of pretend it doesn't have needs, right? Which extends into the next layer of health, which is your behavioral health. And this is kind of like all the stuff that we know we should be doing. Like we should be moving our bodies like most days, like walking or running or swimming or dancing or something.
Or just to stand up. My watch even
Just
tells
to
me
stand up.
it's
right?
time to stand. Like I've been editing for 6 hours straight. Time
Yeah.
to step up.
And listen, I get it. Like when you sit down at the computer, you just kind of like fall into a hole sometimes. And then you look up and it's 5 hours later and like you've been quite productive, but your body, you've just kind of like dissociated from your body, I got a walking desk a year or two ago, and that has made a big difference because I don't have to take time away from work. And obviously I can't be at my walking desk while I'm seeing a client or recording a podcast or something. But if I'm, doing notes, responding to emails, or watching a training is often when I do it. But in that behavioral layer is, are we eating 3 meals a day, like 3 balanced, like nutrient dense meals? Are we moving our bodies? Are we sleeping? A lot of high achievers have some work to do there. And then also, what's our relationship with alcohol and other substances? Because a lot of people that are very stressed are looking for that quick fix, and alcohol in the short term does work. It definitely does not work in the long term, and you actually run into a deficit there. All these behavioral things we know we should do for our physical and mental health, but are actually like kind of hard to implement when you're busy, right? They really are. So I can actually spend a good amount of time with people figuring out how do we implement like behavioral shifts that are going to pay dividends in terms of your energy level, your career longevity, your sense of vitality, and just overall feeling of wellness. And so there's a lot of work to be done in that behavioral layer. And then the third layer is your social health. There's so much evidence, like very clear evidence, that deep, meaningful relationships are some of the best protection we have against burnout, against physical illnesses. People, cancer patients that have incredibly supportive family or loved ones that really show up for them are much more likely to beat cancer and go on to stay in remission. That those relationships are the true markers of health and wellness and predictors of health and wellness. And a lot of people who are high achievers have neglected their relationships because work, right? So coming to a place of like, how do we prioritize you and these 4 layers of health with meaning or spirituality or values being that final inner core of this globe? And how do we make sure that you're doing something in each of those categories every single day? It doesn't need to be a huge amount of time, but you need to attend to those 4 layers of health every day. And if you do that every day, you've gone pretty far in protecting yourself against burnout.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What I would say that one of the selling points to the high achievers could be this: if you tend to these, like truly,
Yes.
not just so I have to do this. Oh, it's on my to-do list. Like truly, very with the deep meaning, you tend to these 3 things every day.
Yep.
Is going to help you do your work better. And
you will be more productive.
Absolutely. And that,
yeah,
I mean, to a high achiever, that's like, okay, I need to do, okay, I will.
Catnip, right?
Yeah. I mean,
you'll be able to do more and feel more relaxed and get a sense of meaning and be able to enjoy your time off the clock. There's a great book by Laura Vanderkam called Off the Clock. She studies time management for mostly for professional women who also have kids. So like people that are really stretched thin and people that really maximize their time off the clock in doing meaningful things, like going to the beach with their family, like doing things that are meaningful. And like, that's the juice of life. That's why we're here. Those moments of connection, the small things, the day to day, the daily joys. It's not emptying your inbox, know? And so as long as we keep a foot in that meaning and the purpose and why we're doing all of this, we're going to be okay.
These high achievers, for some of them that I know, some of them are just that's the way they are. They've been like that since, kindergarten, since forever. And some of them kind of became like that. And that's something that, I mean, I truly admire. It's absolutely an amazing thing, especially if they manage to do the 3 things every day.
Yeah.
And they lead a fulfilling life without, burning out. But for those that are kind of ignoring their body, they're ignoring everything. They're just going to work. Does that potentially stem from trauma or something? Because I was about to go to the question about trauma and realized it didn't ask a very important one before. Does this do these high achievers actually maybe stem from something from their childhood, from a trauma they experienced, perhaps?
98% of the time, yes. And this isn't to pathologize high achievers, like, and let me say, we all have trauma. Like there is no human on this planet that doesn't have trauma. Some of us have more like recognizable acute trauma, like kind of classic trauma, PTSD, right? But trauma is anything that disrupts how you see yourself or the world, and it kind of creates this messaging that can distort your thoughts and behavior. So, for example, let's say you had a really mean music teacher in middle school who like yelled at you, and so you just learned like, oh, I'm not a good musician, and you never picked up an instrument again, right? Like, not huge consequence in your life, but that still is a trauma message.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're bad at music. Like, you were a kid. You weren't necessarily bad at music. Maybe you needed a different instrument or a different way of teaching or a different context, right? Or, I am surprised, although not anymore, but how many times as I'm doing trauma processing, we're kind of going down a chain of events, getting to like an early memory associated with something, and it's being forgotten at school, or like something that you weren't in physical danger, but there was an emotional reality that you were in that led to you feeling, oh, I'm not protected, right? And then there are some people, yeah, exactly. And that the wiring that happened because of that, you maybe had a parent with ADHD who just was forgetful. There was no malice. There was no, gross violation of your bodily autonomy or emotions, but it still has an impact on us. So if we expand the definition of trauma, then yes, all high achievers absolutely have trauma, that we are all of us constantly trying to resolve early wounds, and working and overworking and achieving is a culturally valued way that some people go about that.
What is the difference between managing trauma? I mean, the debilitating one, the music teacher. I mean, that's not going to raise,
No.
too many times in your life. You're just going to say, oh, no, that's not for me. And that's the end of the story. But
yeah,
like real thing,
the debilitating ones,
debilitating one. What is the difference between managing it and actually healing it?
Someone with trauma, I'm going to pick a car accident and apologize to anyone in the audience that has been in a car accident. This is a common trauma, but someone that had a traumatic car accident, they can be sitting in their living room, perfectly safe in their living room. Everyone that's in the home is safe. Everyone, you're just sitting there. Think about the car accident and your body tenses up. And you maybe hear sounds or smell the smell of smoke or rubber or something, right? Like that really visceral reaction. Your body, in part, believes that you are back in that car accident. It's happening right now. Now, managing that trauma is like taking a deep breath, like, okay, I'm okay. I'm in my living room. But you still have that physiological reaction to it. This can be really disruptive for people. For some people, they actually fully go back into it, like as a flashback, and they kind of like depart the present and go back to it. That's classic PTSD flashbacks. But not all people with PTSD have flashbacks like that. Healing trauma is you're sitting in your living room. Something sparks a memory of the car accident. Your body stays calm and you go, yeah, that was a really hard thing I went through. I'm okay now. Like your body knows you are safe, even though that thing happened before. Healing trauma, sometimes the brain naturally just rewires and is like, oh no, that car accident's in the past. You're okay now. And then sometimes, just like our bodies sometimes need medical intervention to heal an infection or a broken bone or something, sometimes you do need therapy or medication temporarily to just be able to function and then also to fully heal it. So maybe you're in the place of managing it and you're like, oh, I have these coping strategies and like I can take some deep breaths, or I can do a visualization, or I have some physical exercises, or I call a friend. And I think a lot of us can relate to that, like managing your trauma. We know what that's like. And then the healing is when your body doesn't have the reaction, so you don't have to manage it. You're never going to be okay that it happened. No one is ever glad they were in a car accident or glad that they had something traumatic happen. But post-traumatic growth is when you can see, like, oh, I have synthesized that experience. My body and my mind believe I am okay now. And maybe I have a new perspective on life. And I appreciate that perspective and how I've been able to grow because of the trauma, even though like no one's glad their trauma happened, right? And so one of the ways that the science is very clear helps heal trauma is EMDR therapy. Stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and it's gaining a lot of popularity in the last 10 years.
I never had, knock on wood, I never had a situation where I would have, as a result, a debilitating trauma response.
Yeah.
For any, I mean, but I have ADHD and I'm very prone to hyperfixation. And when my brain goes into something, it doesn't let it go. So I had to learn ways to friendly and very softly, acknowledge that and tell my brain, okay, let's try this now. Let's try that now. And if it goes into, and it happens very, very rarely, but if it goes into a full blown panic attack, in my head, I know I'm fine. I'm safe. I'm at home. My partner is home. Everything is fine. But my body just goes like, crazy. And then, of course, very deep and very slow breaths. And somebody, I don't know if I've heard that on a podcast or somewhere else, colors. Look at, I don't know, plants and say green. Look at the screen, say white. And go ahead, go around the room. So for a panic attack,
ground yourself in the present.
Exactly. Bring your attention to the room you're in, to things around you, 5 things you can see, 5 things you can smell in each sense. So that has been a really helping hand to me in those situations. But EMDR is something that I'm not too familiar with. So for someone that hears this for the first time in a very short manner, how would you explain that for somebody who never heard of it?
Yeah. So EMDR, first of all, I'll say it looks and sounds weird. And if the research didn't support that, like, this is highly effective, I would just be like, yeah, okay, you want me to do what and think about my trauma? That's crazy. So I will acknowledge it sounds a little bit wacky. But EMDR is founded on this research that Francine Shapiro did in the 80s and 90s. She found that moving your eyes side to side, or in the case of any side to side stimulation, helps the brain process a traumatic memory more like a typical memory. So let's say if I asked you to recall the last time you went to the grocery store, you'd be like, I drove up, I got my cart, and I went through the aisles. I had to go back and get cream cheese, and then I checked out and loaded my groceries in the car. There's no emotional reaction to that, right? Unless like something happened to the grocery store, but like a typical grocery store trip. Like there's no emotional reaction. With EMDR therapy, you can have that similar, like, no emotional reaction when talking through a trauma memory. Now, the memory might still be pretty clear, like you can see it, but that it cuts the connection between the memory and the physical reaction, which is how memory is supposed to be, unless we're thinking about something really positive. Like thinking about like, when I was in my 20s and I went on that like week-long backpacking trip and we would watch the sunrise every morning, and just, it fills you with joy, right?
Yeah.
Because there was meaning there. And so EMDR helps you and actually can incorporate some positive memories into helping your brain store this memory differently so that it's not constantly being accessed in an inappropriate way that sets your body off.
Does it have anything to do with the two parts of the brain? With the, like
Mm-hmm.
the right part is connected to the left side of our body and vice
Yeah.
versa. I mean,
Um,
storing memories and everything. Does it have anything to do with that? The rapid eye
um,
movement.
yeah. I don't know if it's about the connection to different sides of the body. We just know that it helps store the memory on both
Hmm.
sides of the brain rather than just on one side where it's kind of stuck. So the eye movements or the tapping or the tones in going ear to ear um, is what helps facilitate like storing it
Hmm.
bilaterally. Yeah.
So, I wanted to ask you about the traumas, and this is kind of also maybe a bit wacky. Earlier, we talked about these potentially irrational fears like elevators,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
flying, ones we can trace to a concrete event or
Yeah.
feeling. So, what
Yeah.
about those that feel inherited in a way?
Yeah.
There's an
Mm-hmm.
entire
Mm-hmm.
study done around this. So, like
Yeah.
fire, deep water, drowning, or
Yep.
the fear of being
Mhm.
watched in the dark. Do you think that some
Mhm.
of these fears are wired into us
Mhm.
because of our ancestors, like from
Yes.
ancient times? For
Yes.
example, I have a friend, she's debilitatingly afraid of fire. Oh my God. She has,
Mhm.
these extinguishers around the house. She's
Mhm.
terrified of fire breaking in her home. And one of the
Mhm.
things she said to me, probably nobody that she knows, but somebody in her past, some of her
Mhm.
ancestors probably, experienced a
Mhm.
terrible trauma with
Yep.
correlated with fire.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. This epigenetic trauma,
Mm,
there's absolutely evidence for that, and EMDR can work on that. EMDR is great for phobias. I have successfully done, like fear of flying, treated that with EMDR. And in some ways, it's kind of easy to do because it's such a specific target.
mm-hmm,
And, I believe that the outcomes are similar to ERP, which is exposure and response prevention, but I
mm-hmm,
think it's more emotionally easy to tolerate
mm,
EMDR. EMDR can be very intense. I will say that it can be, but ERP is just kind of like intentionally triggering yourself and then not engaging in safety behaviors and coping
mm-hmm,
and that's more of a treatment for OCD, but can also be a treatment for phobias.
mm,
Um, yeah, EMDR. I mean, you can do it on a feeling state, right? You can like this feeling I get um, whenever I'm home alone or whenever I have to give a presentation. And sometimes there's what we call a float back, like an early trauma, and sometimes there isn't. And that's okay. EMDR can work for both.
yeah, it's absolutely
Um,
amazing.
you said something about, doing EMDR on yourself. I would not recommend that.
Mm,
EMDR is a very complex modality. A therapist has to have gone through at least 3 years of graduate school and, be either working under a licensed professional or be independently licensed and go through a 50 plus hour training to be
mm-hmm,
able to do EMDR. If there's an app or something out there claiming to offer EMDR therapy, um, please don't use it to process trauma.
mm-hmm,
You can use bilateral stimulation as a self-soothing when you're thinking about positive memories.
mm-hmm,
So that's actually a great place to start in like building up your resilience and your emotional reserve. Is like make a list of 5 to 10 strong positive memories,
mm-hmm.
and then you can, if you're not driving as you're listening to this, you can just tap side to side on your shoulders and just, close your eyes, think about that a strong positive memory, and just see what happens in your body as you're doing that.
That seems super simple, but also
Mm-hmm.
absolutely amazing. You reminded me of going side to side, binaural
Mm-hmm.
beats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're also a very common thing in meditation
Yeah.
to be offered. I don't like
Yeah.
them. They kind of, I
Mm.
feel like my head, something is going through my ears like this. I'm not
Mhm,
really, it gives me that icky
mhm.
feeling.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to sound as well.
Mhm.
But that can also be this side to side stimulation for somebody
Yeah.
that
Mhm.
finds it enjoyable.
Yeah. When you think about we walk, that is side to side stimulation. If you
Mm,
swim,
mm,
that's, if you're doing, freestyle or backstroke, it's side to side. Like there's a lot of things we do that are side to side. And, probably, I don't know the research on this, but probably some of our brains just naturally storing and reprocessing things happens, which is why I think we are more traumatized when we don't move,
mm-hmm,
right? Is we're not doing any side to side stimulation. Um, binaural beats, great, especially if you're in a place of like mental calm
mm,
or, focusing on a soothing image or body sensation. Yeah, absolutely. You can use some of the principles of EMDR, but I
mm-hmm.
would not process trauma on your own. That could get really
Tangled.
scary and really messy too
Mm-hmm.
fast. Yeah.
Your blog post
Mm-hmm.
says what we want everyone to know about EMDR, lays out some beautiful points. But let's
Mm-hmm.
go to a quick. I do this with most of my guests. A
Mm-hmm.
quick myth busting session.
Sure.
So somebody
Yeah.
might think that EMDR is just hypnosis in disguise.
Mm, no, definitely not. And actually, hypnosis itself is misunderstood. When people think of hypnosis, they think of like stage hypnosis,
And
where
the
someone like
clock moving right.
mind control, right? I have some therapist friends who offer hypnotherapy, and like you are fully in control the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
And same with EMDR. I do hear people say that they enter like kind of a meditative state during EMDR, that feels pleasant or altered, but um, you can stop at any time.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just like, nope, too much, I don't want to do this, then your EMDR therapist should honor that.
Mm-hmm.
The EMDR therapist, honestly, more so than other types of therapy, is more of just a facilitator of the
Mm-hmm.
healing. Your brain, so your EMDR therapist is helping you like hack your brain, and then you are facilitating your own healing with the EMDR therapist guiding you. The EMDR therapist shouldn't be suggesting anything or, um, yeah, it's really collaborative in a way that I quite enjoy as a therapist.
One of the best healing comes from within, same as with EMDR. But yes,
Yeah.
I acknowledged that you said that this should not be done on your own
Yeah.
when processing trauma.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
what do you think about some people might say, and I've heard this a million times, talking about trauma is like picking a wound. It just,
Mm,
makes it worse.
mm. Yes, and people experience re-traumatization if they have to retell the story in a context that isn't aimed towards healing it.
Mm-hmm.
So, people with medical issues often, or people that have experienced a sexual assault, having to retell the story or re-explain your symptoms and history, that can be re-traumatizing, right? But in the context of therapy, in EMDR, you actually don't have to give a ton of detail as
Mm-hmm.
long as you are accessing it.
Right here.
Um, yeah. And if you are accessing it fully and your therapist just like kind of knows the basics of it, but you're fully in it, that's fine. Your therapist doesn't need to know all the details. I once witnessed a master trainer do a full EMDR session with no information about the trauma being processed. Just, talking to the person doing the demonstration and saying, okay, let's access the memory and the fake client said,
Mhm.
okay, I'm there. And they did the full session with no detail. And at the very end, they were able to fully process it. And at the very end, the person got up and said, that was a violent sexual assault. And the
Mhm.
therapist had no idea. Right now, most EMDR therapists, they're going to ask for more detail
Mhm.
than that, but you can just kind of give a high level
Mhm.
without having to
Mhm.
verbally convey it, because
Like an
sometimes,
overview.
yeah, doing an overview, and often around trauma, it disrupts our language centers, so it's
Mhm.
hard to talk about, and that's normal, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's actually really good. I mean, for most people don't really like. Some people do because it really helps them, you
Yeah.
know, heal in a way. When I experience something, I mean, not traumatizing, but when I experience a bad day talking to my mom or my sister, my partner, it
Mm-hmm.
really, really helps. And that's what I'm
Yes.
trying to, but I'm trying to explain that to some other people as well. But
Mm.
not everybody is the same. Some people like to,
Yeah.
internalize that, finish with
Mm-hmm.
that inside their head. And that EMDR is probably a
Yeah.
better solution for those
Yes.
people than
Yeah.
like conventional therapy might be, because a
Yes.
conventional psychotherapist probably
Yeah.
needs all of the information
All the
to make all the
detail.
connections that are
Yeah.
needed. Um,
One of the first widespread uses of EMDR in the US, where it was actually getting some attention, was after 9/11.
mhm,
And the first responders for 9/11, they saw and experienced horrific things that day. And EMDR was offered to a lot of first responders and firefighters and emergency medical professionals. A lot of them, for months after 9/11, they had these little buttons that they wore that said EMDR, it's effing magic, because they were actually able to prevent PTSD. If you do EMDR immediately after a major trauma, it actually can prevent
mhm.
full PTSD from forming, which is great because prevention is much easier than going back and treating once it's already kind of ballooned into that. So, you don't think of firefighters and other first responders as being people that want to sit in therapy and talk about their feelings and talk in a lot of detail.
Mm.
And EMDR was a great fit for them because of that.
It's absolutely amazing. The
Hmm.
earlier you start with
Yeah.
after something bad happens, it doesn't have to be
Hmm.
super. I believe that it doesn't have to be super traumatizing. It's just something that
Yeah.
you cannot. Me being with hyper focus on certain things, if I want to, like, that's not traumatizing. So I may or may not try to work on that. Like when I have a fixating thought about, I don't know,
Mm.
what am I going to wear? Like a benign thing,
Yeah.
everyday thing. And I cannot get that out of my head.
Yeah.
Would EMDR work in that, just to calm my brain
Mm.
to, it's fine. You're going to find what you're going to wear. And I know that
Mm.
like
Yeah.
consciously, but the subconscious is just like over there. And what are you going to wear? What are you going to wear? Would
Yeah.
in that cases
Yeah.
also help?
Well, so possibly, if
Hmm.
you were a client of mine, which you're not, I would go like, okay, tell me about what do you feel in your body as you're thinking about this, like
Mm,
looping on what do I wear? What do I wear? Okay. Okay. So let's say you said, I'm feeling it in my stomach and like my hands and feet are really restless. Okay, great. Let's let your mind float back to an early memory when you had that feeling in your body. And it could be, um, I'm going to make up a memory. Like, let's
hmm.
say you showed up to like a 10-year-old birthday party and everyone was in fancy party dresses and you were in your little league gear, right? That there's something there. Like, this is not a life threatening trauma, but there was something in there
Mm,
about, oh, do I fit in or am I accepted? Right. So that's an example of like, if we can find where that fixation is coming from, then EMDR could work for that. Yeah.
got it. I mean, it's
Hmm.
super interesting when you think
Hmm.
about these kinds of things
Mhm.
looping in your head. I
Mhm.
mean, for most of these things, I attribute that to just the way my brain is wired. And on other days, I say my ADHD is my superpower, because
Yeah.
so many things that I do because of that. Like,
Yeah.
but it
Mhm.
can be really annoying at times. But
Mm.
to anybody listening that has the same wiring as I do, I'd say
Mhm.
just, there are beautiful ways, super friendly ways to your brain that you can, just manage it when you need to manage it. When it don't need to, I just let it flow.
Yeah.
because
Uh-huh.
some of the creativity even can happen there. But Laurel, you mentioned a grand therapist that you watched, but you
Yeah.
also trained other therapists. You even taught at Pepperdine, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is what is one belief or habit that you try to unteach in new therapists or colleagues, even when you
Yeah.
talk to
Uh-huh.
them?
Um, oh gosh, I don't know that there's one. It's so different. And on my staff, because I hire pre-licensed therapists and they do like the equivalent of their
Mm-hmm.
medical residency with me. Um, and they're all different. Some of them it's building up confidence. Some of them it's a specific clinical skill. Everyone on my staff goes through EMDR training, and we
Mm-hmm.
because we get a lot of requests for that. Um, but I feel like a lot of young therapists or, students they feel really intimidated about working with trauma. And I'm just kind of like, you can't be a therapist and not work with trauma. And you only ever see one client at a time, right? Like you're just working with what's right in front of you. And if we can connect, like have that human connection, that's the most important thing, because the clinical skill, you can have all the clinical skills in the world, but if people can't connect with you and can't relate with you, you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be a successful therapist. Your clients aren't going to stick around. So, like, show up as a human first. And I think this is applicable to your audience. Show up as a human first, and then worry about the technical skill and the achievement and all of that, which is just such a wonderful bridge back to those 4 layers of health and medical, behavioral, social, and meaning. If you show up as a human first and a professional second, you won't burn out.
It's really well said. I think I'm going to put this into the trailer.
Okay.
I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
Laurel, I'd like to go a bit personal.
Okay.
To usually my colleagues that do podcasts like
Mm-hmm.
to start with this part. I like to put it
Mm,
at the end, like the
sure.
sweet thing to for the end.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go back, I don't know, to your younger self
Mm-hmm.
and tell her one sentence of advice, what would it
Mm.
be?
I was lucky in that someone actually said the thing to me that I would say to myself. I was 17 and I had a teacher say, "Hey, Laurel, it's going to be a lot easier to be Laurel at 25 than it is to be 17. And it's going to be easier to be Laurel at 35 than it is to be 25. And I'm just about to be 40. And I'm just kind of like, it's a lot easier to be Laurel at almost 40 than it even was at 35. So I think that um, and, there's hard years in there, but I, I think that we can have a lot more self compassion when we think about like, yes, this is actually hard right now. And it does get easier as you go on living your life.
And that feels like something that a lot of people need to hear, especially the ones
Mm-hmm.
who never let themselves slow down. You know who I'm
Yes.
talking about.
The
you,
achievers. Yes.
you
The
listening.
traumatized achievers.
What about something that you can talk for 60 minutes or more, unrelated
Uh-huh.
to therapy?
Um, musical theater history. Like I could tell you about like the Rodgers and Hammerstein effect on Broadway and how that went into like more of the new age, like Stephen Schwartz and like some of the more contemporaries, and then the 90s era with Jonathan Larson and the rock musical and like other things. So I could talk about that for 60 minutes, but that's not this podcast.
This is one of my favorite parts because after
Mm-hmm.
getting this professional profile
Yeah.
of people,
Uh-huh.
I get to the juicy part. Like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is you professionally, just like we
Yeah.
talked at the beginning. But
Yeah.
who are you really? What do you enjoy?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
what
that's
is
part
the
of my why. It's part of like, why do I do all this work? I am, I think my younger self would be so happy to know I am a season ticket holder at every major theater in Los Angeles. right? And like my work has enabled me to do that. But if I never took time off, I saw a fabulous play at the Geffen Theater last night. And if I weren't allowing myself to be a human and to have that like meaning layer, being an arts enthusiast and a patron of the arts is a huge part of my identity, has nothing to do with my professional identity, but it's the why, it's the juice of life.
Yeah. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
great to acknowledge that and to look at your younger self and tell her
Mm-hmm.
you would be proud
Yep.
about, you
Uh-huh.
would be proud. What is the
Mm-hmm.
worst advice you've been given, professionally or or personally?
There isn't anything that stands out, but it's anything that I immediately know is in conflict with my values.
Mm.
So that goes to that core part of health, right? And like, no, if you don't really know what I mean when I say values, I got this great card deck recently called the Live Your Values deck. And it just has like, it's a deck of cards, and you can just kind of go through and see which ones resonate with you and
Mhm.
where, and it has been helpful for me. Um, but, you know, as I was growing my business, I worked with some consultants that their mindset was basically like profit before everything. And I was just kind of like, I'm in a human centered business. I'm in a relationship centered business. And if I don't make business decisions with relationships at the forefront of those decisions, it's going to fail.
Mm.
So the advice that I got that was bad advice was, you know, things that conflicted with my values and the values that are my business values. Yeah.
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 So when I look at some of the, advice I've been given through the years, there's been everything, the same as in everybody's life. And I today I look at these people and this advice that I've been given. They didn't have anything bad in mind. They didn't want me harm.
No.
They were giving me
No.
advice, and like, you should do this, you should do that. But I'm really proud of myself, uh, in those situations where I acknowledged what they wanted to do, and I said
Yeah.
thank you and did what I wanted to
Yep.
do. So I'm really proud of that, and
Uh-huh.
I'm
Because
I'm
you
proud of
were
any.
living in your values and you were
Exactly.
making decisions based on yours.
Exactly.
When we make decisions that are not based in our values, they pretty much don't work out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And years later, we might look at those decisions that we made based on bad advice, which we knew
Mm-hmm.
it was bad advice, and say like,
Yeah.
God, why did I do this? This is totally
Mm-hmm.
not me. So it's important to acknowledge when, when you get this feeling, okay, this is totally not me,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement. Laurel, this conversation has been like therapy in disguise, but in the best possible way. I mean,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you for the clarity, the honesty, it's been really fun. And
Yeah.
thank you for your down to earth energy that you brought to this episode.
Yeah, this is what I love to do. I love to talk about what I do, and I love to demystify therapy and just kind of talk about like the soup we're all swimming in all the time. So thanks for giving me a platform to keep talking about it.
For more on Laurel, check laureltherapy.net. Link will be down in the description. And if you're curious about EMDR trauma recovery or just want to understand yourself better, you'll find resources, articles, and ways to work with her and her team. All links are down there, as I said. And if this episode by any chance hit a nerve, like it, share it with somebody who needs it. And I'll see you all in the next. If you like what we do here, please consider subscribing to the Noelle Effect. Hit the like button. It really helps the channel and me to continue doing what we do. Thank you for listening.